Since we have a working profile component, let's extend this artist information by grabbing a list of their most popular tracks and making them playable. Before we do that, however, we can change our code a little bit for some user interface fixes and just to make it more readable. First off, let's reformat some of our code in profile.jsx in order to make it cleaner. I'm going to indent this because it looks pretty big on one line. As well as my ternary expression, I'm going to put this question mark aligned with the equality check. And that's looking better already. Let's add a space after the followers, before the followers. And cool. Now within app.jsx, I don't want to see this templating before I've even searched for anything. So the templating will be done in the profile and the gallery. Let's place that within here. And then we won't show it until the state of the artist is not null. So if it's not null, we'll show the profile. If it is null, we'll show a div that has nothing within it. Let's save. Here's the thing about subsequent divs. We need to wrap two divs within each other or within another div, so that way we don't have React complaining. And as we save, everything's fine. So now as I search for an artist, such as Bruno Mars, the templating doesn't show up until the artist is valid. Cool. Now we can move on to fetching an artist's top tracks. Let's go back to Profile, and also within another browser or tab, navigate back to the Spotify API. This time, we'll want the information from the Spotify in the artist section. You'll want to find the endpoint that says get an artist's top tracks. So web API, get an artist's top tracks. As you can see, the endpoint works pretty simply. Just like before, we need to use an HTTP GET request in order to grab the JSON formatted data for an artist's top tracks. And within our URL, we simply specify the ID of the artist we would like to get. So let's go ahead and copy this endpoint over here. Go to your search function and paste it as the album URL. I'm going to call it album URL constant. Let's take out the end over here, so it just goes up to the artist section. Now luckily, when we declare our artist over here, it already has an ID property, so we can take advantage of that to search for their top tracks. So now we can modify this fetch URL to fetch some albums. We'll have a template string again. Our first one will be the album URL, a slash, then the artist.id, and then we'll want to finish this string. We'll say top tracks, and then finally, the necessary last part is the country code. And for now, we can just use the US, and the reason it's required is because Spotify makes it required. So if you're outside of the US or you want to get requests from a different country, go ahead and click this link over here. It links to a Wikipedia article where it has all the relevant country codes. Now, we simply need to use the fetch function and follow the same pattern as before from promise to promise to return the JSON that we need. So we'll fetch on the fetch URL. Our method, of course, is get. And then we'll return a response, and we're basically redeclaring the variable. And then we'll return the JSON we want. And hopefully, this will be the artist's top tracks and JSON. So let's check if this actually works. Let's go back to our React application. In our fetch URL, remember we declared it as a constant. Well, since we're redeclaring it, we should declare it a let, so that way it's modifiable. Let's reload. Let's look up Bruno Mars. And as we can see with this fetch URL, I added an extra slash here. So let's take out this slash. You guys probably caught that. Let's try one more time. Bruno Mars. And great. Looks like we got some top tracks. And here they all are. They have a preview URL, an ID. And the best part is it has an album object where we can find some playable files. So great. Now that we have tracks logging, let's prepare ourselves and set those tracks as state. So let const tracks equals json.tracks, and we'll set the state of tracks to tracks. But remember, we can use some ES6 shorthand, so we'll set the state to tracks. Of course, we want to initialize tracks to an empty array. And then finally, here's another ES6 trick. When the variable name and the key that we want to access within a function or object is exactly the same, we can just say here that tracks is equal to JSON. Now this becomes especially useful when you're declaring multiple variables at one time when you're trying to grab multiple keys of an object. So for example, if I had tracks and then albums, then artist here, and JSON had each of those keys, we would declare all three of these variables at once. We're only getting one though, so let's just say tracks. Let's save. Look up the Beatles for a change. So since everything's working, we can move on to creating a gallery for all of these tracks and of course, eventually making them playable.